A special contributor to Court TV, Ashley Banfield, who is with us tonight. Ashley, this is one that happened, and as soon as it happened, I got to see the video, and I started thinking, I know we're doing this Monday night. I know we're doing it. I didn't think it would escalate to the reaction that it did, but with everything else happening in the country, it doesn't shock you. But I know you had an opportunity today to speak with the attorney for the family. And the family, when you lose someone, it crushes you. It absolutely crushes you. But under this atmosphere and these circumstances, everything gets absolutely amplified for them.
It does. And I think a lot of people will watch the videotape that they've seen of this incident and see something different, or see pieces along the way that they can either criticize or identify with. And I think what's critical, Vinny, is here we are, we're Court TV, and we look at things through the legal lens. And this will be very different, this particular case. That doesn't matter when you're a family member of a man who has just died. And it really doesn't matter if you're a family member of someone who's just died and the whole country is marching about people who look just like your family member who just died. So with that as sort of the contours, I spoke with the attorney who's representing the family of Rayshard Brooks. The family left behind, they got together for a very emotional news conference today to say how they felt about the last 24 hours, especially watching the Wendy's burn down. And they were very, very clear on what they didn't want. They don't want to see that kind of violence and any kind of looting or burning. What they do want, they want to see the justice they believe they are due in this case. And to that end, I spoke with their attorney, Justin Miller.
I want to ask you right out of the gate, how is the family doing?
They're doing about as well as you could, think they would be doing in this situation. But it's pretty bad. I don't know. We had a press conference this morning, and there were a couple of outbursts from family members. It's really raw for them right now. So I'd say after doing a few of these, they are doing as well as I've seen, but it's still not good.
Tell me what they want to see come out of this.
The mother, Tamika, she says she wants to see charges for the officers. Of course, both officers fired, and she wants to see changes in police tactics and use of force hierarchy. But, what they really want to see is their father and husband come back and family member come back, which we all know can't happen, unfortunately.
So the family would like to see charges for both the officer who fired and the other officer as well?
Yes.
What would the charge be for the other officer?
I don't know, because this is what the mother is asking for when you say the family. So I'm giving you what the family is telling me. And their indication was that, he should have done something to stop the other officer from moving to a position where he would or could shoot and kill Mr. Brooks.
How are they reacting to everything that's happened since? The people who've shown up in support of them, those who've gone overboard and torched the Wendy's. What are their thoughts?
The family is definitely not in agreement with any kind of destruction of property. They have said that from the beginning. They are, though, behind the protesters, and they want the protesters to continue until real change occurs. So they are happy that people care, about their loved one, but they're not happy to see any destruction of property.
You are an attorney who has represented a number of clients, not unlike the client that you're representing now. And I'm wondering if your experience from all of these different cases is changing the way you look going forward at the cases you're handling.
What that experience does is it kind of makes you a little harder. When I first started doing these, I was a little more free-spirited in my thought process about them. And now I'm a little more stern when I think about them. We ask for the same thing every time. We say we want justice, but nothing seems to change. These things continue to happen. And real justice is almost impossible to get. Not even almost, it is impossible to get for these families.
Your partner represented the family of Walter Scott in South Carolina, who was shot and killed by an officer who then planted a taser on him. And I remember a term coming up in that case about fleeing felon as a defense. That doesn't apply in that case because he planted the taser. I'm wondering if it could apply in this case if there are charges, given that there was a taser involved. And it might end up being a case that needs to be litigated if there are charges.
I think one of the big differences between that case and this case is that Mr. Brooks did not commit any felony. Mr. Brooks was inebriated. The officers moved him to the side. So I think that would be a DUI charge that probably would end up being something less than that at the time, because he wasn't actually moving his vehicle when they came. The only time that vehicle moved was when they asked him to move it to the side. That's number one. And then number two, him fleeing from that assault, I don't know, and I haven't seen that case law. I do not know if him fleeing from the actual incident that would have led to them saying he's a fleeing felon would give them that kind of defense in that case.
This is such a hard question, but I think it's a necessary question. Do you think that the officer in this case fired on Rayshard, whereas with another suspect who'd be fleeing, who was white, would not have fired? Do you believe the reason that the service weapon was discharged was because the suspect was black?
I don't think that was the sole reason, no. And I don't even necessarily think that it was probably a main reason. But what I do believe with police officers, and this is just the community at large, Atlanta is a very segregated place. You know, black people live on one side of town or different sides of town. There are sides of town that are predominantly white. And when people go out to hang out and go to restaurants, people are usually going to places that are kind of segregated. I was talking to one of my friends, and we were just talking about how you could go, if you lived in an area that's predominantly white, you could go, a month and barely see a black person, and vice versa. So I don't think race was a factor in the way of, say like a KKK or a skinhead type of way. I think it was more, if you are not familiar with the people in the community that you're policing in, then you would probably have a little bias when you meet those community members. You're going to have whatever stereotypical thoughts you have of those community members. And that's why, one of the reforms I'd like to see in policing is that police officers have to do 100 hours of community service in whatever community they're going to be policing in. At a boys club or a YMCA or a shelter, things of that nature, so that they know and get to meet the people in that community the same way they know and get to meet the people that they live around and go to the gym around and go to school around and things of that nature.
And dovetailing off that, Justin, has the family even had time yet to process the incredibly swift action of the Atlanta mayor in announcing the signing of sweeping reform in terms of use of force?
No, we have not had a chance to speak to the family about those reforms. And we probably will tomorrow morning. We think those reforms are generally good. They're a good start, but there are definitely other things that we'd like to add to it and see done. So I know all of it can't happen at one time, but there are definitely other things that we feel are very important in reforming policing in this country and in this city.
Mr. Brooks is the father of 4. Now this is a tough question too. How are those kids doing?
Not good at all. We're coming up on Father's Day this weekend. This is the week before Father's Day for your kids. And, this is what you have to deal with them. And these are kids that, love their father, were around their father. He wasn't an absentee dad or anything of that nature. So this is going to be a hard weekend for those kids.
No matter what the debate, whether it's social debate or whether it's debate in a courtroom, the kids don't know anything about the debate. They just lost their dad.
I've seen all of the people on TV, all the talking heads, everybody debating it. And I get the debates. I understand both sides of the argument, of course. But I like to just focus everyone back into what really matters. And that is, a man lost his life, and children lost a father, a wife lost a husband, and a lot of family members lost a brother and a cousin and an uncle and a nephew. So to me, that's really what's important. What I stress and what I am calling for and what I ask people is this: just show a little empathy, right? Even if you don't believe what we believe and believe that it happened for the reasons it happened, just show some empathy. And I think that that's one thing that's lacking today in in America. People are either on one side or the other, and they don't have any kind of empathy or respect for anyone else. And so in situations like these, it's not a liberal or conservative thing. It's just a human thing. And if people would show a little bit more empathy, I think we could figure out a lot more problems and get a lot more stuff taken care of.
I think Justin Miller makes an incredibly good point regarding empathy. And I think there's a lack of empathy right now in this charged environment that needs to abate before people can really see things with a clear legal eye as pertains to each case and a court of law. Because that's the cry right now, Vinny, that Rayshard's family wants justice. They want to see charges for both officers. I am skeptical about charges for the second officer. I think in this environment, it wouldn't be unusual to see a charge against the first officer. But as a former prosecutor, I'd love to know your thoughts on that, how the current environment may actually inform prosecutions going forward like this.
Yeah, well, the two things. I mean, if you talk about the second officer, I don't even know what the charges would be. I have no idea what they would be in that case. Here's the way I look at it. I look at cases as a prosecutor. Is it a case that I can win? Is it a case that I can prove beyond any and all reasonable doubt? Because that is your job. Your job is not to get convictions. Your job is to prove a case and bring cases where you believe the evidence has convinced you beyond a reasonable doubt, right? That in fact someone's guilty. So, in Georgia, justifiable homicide is, there's a threat of death or great bodily harm, or in the midst of a forced felony. And you look at this situation, it's a lawful arrest. I don't think there's going to be anyone that's going to argue that it's not a lawful arrest if his blood alcohol is 0.10 over the legal limit and he's in a car. I could prosecute that DUI case. And
I'm not a lawyer,
cases
and
just
I
like
could.
that.
I mean, I hate to say
Yeah.
that. That's a really hard thing to hear, especially, listen, for this family, I don't think they want to hear any of this because it's just pain. They're just going through so much pain, right? But I think everybody else needs to step back and look at each case differently. I think you said it today earlier. This is not the George Floyd case. And if you're looking for a prosecution, a conviction, and a life sentence for these two officers, that could be really tricky because that was a DUI arrest. And I think if you canvass Mothers Against Drunk Driving, they would be aghast at the idea that anybody would be allowed to walk away having blown over the legal limit and be allowed to walk home. So, I know that in retrospect, looking at that there's a man dead, it just is completely unfair that a man is dead because of that. But you have to look at the entire chain of events. And that was a legal arrest, as you said. And then it really becomes this whole fleeing felon question. You and I talked about this at length. The fleeing felon in the Walter Scott case in South Carolina, very different. He wasn't actually carrying a taser. Walter Scott was running away without anything, and the officer planted the taser. But I remember talking to legal experts then who said had he been carrying the taser, officers there with a fleeing felon could actually shoot because someone's carrying a dangerous weapon out to the public. How do you see that pertaining to this particular case?
Well, again, you look at, all right, if in fact the DA decides to bring charges, I mean, what is the defense going to allege? They're going to allege justifiable homicide. They're going to say, number one, he just engaged in a forced felony. He just punched a police officer, assaulted him, aggravated assault, and stole his taser. Okay, that's a robbery. That's a forced felony. Now you've got a man who's under the influence, who has just assaulted a police officer and stolen something from him and is now fleeing, and then commits another aggravated assault by firing the taser at the officer. You start adding those things up. If I'm the prosecutor, that's a tough one. I mean, that's a tough one to overcome. Remember, it's beyond a reasonable doubt that nothing that the defense is saying is a reasonable explanation or justifiable to this.
You're right,
so
Jimmy,
I think
but
it's going to be a difficult decision that the DA's got to make.
But you're in this environment now where your jury is going to be very different. And so maybe the prosecutor will say, a month ago, I don't think I could have gotten a jury on my side. Today, I kind of think I can. I think I got enough people out there and a charged environment that I think I can get a jury on my side to see it my way. And that's why I'm wondering if the tables turn with regard to the people you're serving.
Yeah, and it's not just a jury because DAs are elected in Georgia. It's also voters.
Good point.
Potential voters.
Excellent point.
That's the other part of the equation. Ashley, great stuff. Thank you so much.